Welcome to Heart Over Gold, the channel where love, kindness, and humanity shine brighter than any fortune. In today's story, Gina Michael's life was shattered when she was abandoned while pregnant with quadruplets by Robert John, her fiancé, and her sister Maxine. Years later, Gina returns, not as the woman she once was, but as a formidable lawyer seeking justice. As she confronts those who betrayed her, the stakes grow higher when her son, Johnny, needs a life-saving heart procedure. Forced to face Robert once again, Gina's journey of revenge, forgiveness, and healing leads to unexpected twists that will change their lives forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. A woman was cruelly humiliated and left behind while pregnant with quadruplets. Fast forward years later, and she returns, not just as a woman, but as a formidable lawyer. What happens when she finally faces the ones who tore her apart? The shock is immeasurable. Her vengeance surpasses all expectations. Before the video starts, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're from so we can bring you even more content. Robert raised his glass with a charming grin, his smile captivating everyone in the room, including Gina, who had once fallen for it. Here's to the woman who, with her simplicity and resilience, taught this son of the elite that true worth is found in more than just looks and wealth. The guests sighed and cheered in agreement. Mrs. Eleanor, ever poised, allowed a small smile of approval. Mr. Thomas, Gina's father, kept his emotions in check, hiding the pride in his eyes. At that very moment, Robert's phone, left carelessly on the table beside Gina, buzzed with a new message. The screen lit up with words Gina wasn't prepared to see. "After this charade ends, meet me at our usual place. I need you tonight." The sender's name, Maxine, her own sister, displayed next to a heart emoji. Time seemed to stand still. The champagne slipped from Gina's hand, spilling over her turquoise dress. When their eyes met, Robert saw not just pain, but the rise of a force that would forever alter the course of their lives. At 27, Gina had become everything the small town admired, but secretly envied. The daughter of a fisherman and a lace maker, she had achieved what few could: an education, a respectable teaching job, and, to crown her success, an engagement to Robert John, heir to the town's wealthiest family. Have you ever felt that odd sense of dread? The kind that creeps up your spine, warning you that something's off, even when everything seems fine? Gina felt it too, but brushed it aside. Fate doesn't give clear signs. It whispers, and we often confuse it for just anxiety. That evening, her father, Mr. Thomas, awaited her in his finest suit, the one saved for special moments. "You look beautiful, just like your mother did on our engagement day," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you, Dad," Gina smiled, feeling the absence of her mother deeply. "She'd be so proud today, don't you think?" "She would, my daughter. The most educated woman in our family," he chuckled, masking his emotions. They climbed into the shiny black sedan sent by Robert, driving through the cobblestone streets as the town watched them. In small towns, every move is noticed. The John mansion, perched atop the hill, was a beacon of wealth, glowing with lights and surrounded by paper lanterns swaying gently in the sea breeze. The sounds of a string quartet blended with the fragrance of flowers and the salty air. This was Gina's official entry into the John world, not as a teacher, but as a future member of the family. A mix of pride and unease settled in her chest. Would she ever truly belong? Maxine, her younger sister, waited by the entrance in a striking red dress. Her smile was more reserved than usual, and Gina felt a sudden unease. "Finally!" "I thought you had given up," Maxine greeted her, but her voice sounded hurried, too quick. "Robert's waiting inside. Let's go." Inside, the grand hall shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the buzz of guests. Gina recognized some teachers, parents, and local authorities. Mrs. Eleanor John, Robert's mother, was the first to approach. With her neat bun and perfect navy silk dress, she greeted Gina with a polite but cold smile. "You look lovely, Gina," she said, her gaze lingering on Gina's simple dress. "Robert is out on the balcony. Why don't you join him?" Something about Mrs. Eleanor's tone made Gina uneasy, but she dismissed it. The balcony, with its view of the sea, had always been her favorite part of the house. As they arrived, Robert, glass of whiskey in hand, was deep in conversation. "Here you are." Maxine's voice sounded too loud. Robert turned with a flicker of guilt, quickly replaced by a forced smile. He kissed Gina on the lips, his scent not the one she had given him. "You look stunning," he said, his smile too wide. "Come, I want you to meet my cousins." The night unfolded like a ship adrift in a storm. Gina smiled, chatted, accepted congratulations, but felt more like a bystander at her own celebration. Robert, always pulled away by important guests, barely stayed by her side. Maxine, too, seemed strangely distant, drifting in and out of the crowd. Then, during the toast, Gina's world came crashing down. Robert's father, Mr. August John, stood at the center of the room raising his glass. The crowd fell silent. Today we celebrate not only an engagement, but a union of traditions. The John family is proud of its legacy, and Robert, representing the fifth generation, has chosen Gina, a woman of humble beginnings, for her intellect and hard work. Gina flushed. Was it a compliment or a veiled reminder of her place? Robert's discomfort was palpable, and Gina felt the weight of every word. "Let's raise our glasses to honesty," Mr. John continued. Gina took a sip of champagne, the cold sensation sinking deep inside her. Then, Gina's eyes landed on Robert's phone, sitting next to her. The screen lit up with a message. "We need to talk. I can't live with this lie anymore. She doesn't deserve this." The sender, Maxine. The world seemed to stop. The party noises faded as Gina's hand shook. She unlocked the phone with the code Robert had never changed, the number of his childhood home. The messages were relentless. "Yesterday was amazing. I miss you. 5 years is too long to live in the shadows." The truth hit Gina like a hammer. 5 years, her entire relationship with Robert, had been a lie. The pieces fell together painfully. Robert's trips were timed with Maxine's visits to the capital, the new perfume they both wore. The phone slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the table. When she looked up, Robert and Maxine stood there, guilty and horrified. "Gina." Robert took a step toward her, but she recoiled. The room fell silent as the guests realized something had broken. Mrs. Eleanor quickly moved in, ever the one to manage crises. "What's going on here?" she asked, though Gina's voice cut through the tension. "Ask your son," Gina replied, the words firm and cutting. "Ask him about my sister and the lies you've all been hiding for years." A collective gasp spread through the room. The illusion shattered. Robert's panic was clear, but Gina saw through it. "We have nothing to talk about anymore," she said, slipping the engagement ring off her finger and placing it on the table. "This party is over." With newfound strength, Gina walked out, her father at her side, a mixture of confusion and sadness in his eyes. "Let's go home, Dad," she whispered. As they descended the hill, the car was silent. Gina allowed herself the first tears of the night. Not just for lost love, but for the broken trust that would never be repaired. "What happened in there, my daughter?" her father asked quietly. "Life is showing me who people really are, Dad," she replied, gazing out at the distant city lights, "and who I need to be from now on." That night, in her small bed, Gina felt something shift. The pain was still there, but so was the strength she never knew she had. As she closed her eyes, a promise formed in her heart. This was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning. What Gina didn't know as she drifted off to sleep was that, inside her, new life was stirring. 4 new lives, in fact. And fate, as always, had a twist in store. The storm had only just begun. They would come later on lonely nights in a cheap hotel room in the state capital, where no one knew her name or her story. For now, there was only the certainty that for the first time she had taken control of her own destiny. What do you think is going to happen next? Will Gina forgive Robert? Will her sister Maxine try to get her to come back? Tell us in the comments what you would do if you were in Gina's shoes. A new life. Impossible, Gina murmured, staring at the doctor across the table. There must be some mistake. Dr. Cecilia, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind red-rimmed glasses, slid the ultrasound onto the table. "There's no mistake. Gina, there are 4 distinct gestational sacs. You're expecting quadruplets." The world seemed to spin around her. 3 weeks after fleeing her own wedding, after abandoning everything she knew, life presented her with this cruel twist. Or was it a gift in disguise? "But I was on birth control," she protested weakly, knowing that the constant vomiting of the past few days, which she had initially attributed to stress, now made terrible sense. "No method is 100% effective," the doctor replied with a compassionate smile. "And in your case, it seems nature had quite ambitious plans. 4 babies, 4 lives growing inside her when she could barely support her own. The money she had brought, her years of savings as a teacher, was running out quickly with hotel expenses. She hadn't been able to find a job in the capital without references and with a downcast look. Private schools closed their doors to her after brief interviews. What? What are my options?" Her voice was almost inaudible. The compassion in Dr. Cecilia's eyes deepened. "You have all the options the law allows, Gina. But I need to warn you that a quadruplet pregnancy is considered high risk. You will need specialized care regardless of the decision you make." That night, Alone in the hotel room, Gina placed her hand on her still flat belly. 4 small hearts were already beating there, unaware of the turmoil surrounding their existence. The irony was not lost on her. When she thought she had lost everything, life gave her not 1 but 4 new reasons to continue. She picked up the phone and for the first time in weeks, dialed a familiar number. "Aunt Dula, it's Gina. I need help." Aunt Dulce's house was on the outskirts of Shellfish Village, far enough from the center to offer the anonymity Gina desperately sought. It was a simple 2-bedroom house surrounded by a small orchard of fruit trees and protected by a sun-faded wooden fence. "I'm not going to ask what happened," the 70-year-old woman said, hugging her niece upon her arrival. "I know enough from the rumors, and you can tell me the rest when you're ready." The unconditional kindness almost broke the barrier Gina had carefully built around her emotions. "I'm pregnant, Aunt," she confessed, the first tears in weeks finally escaping with quadruplets. Aunt Dulce, who had lived her whole life alone after losing her fiancé to the sea decades ago, showed no shock or judgment. She just nodded as if that information was just another logistical detail to solve. "Well, then we'll need more milk and eggs than I imagined," she replied with practical simplicity, "and we'll have to turn the sewing room into a baby room." It was in this small refuge that Gina spent the first months of her pregnancy, hidden from the curious eyes of the city. The news inevitably spread. In a small town like Shellfish Village, even the wind carried secrets. Director Sterling called. Aunt Dulce informed her one morning while serving a herbal tea to relieve Gina's constant nausea. She said, "Your temporary leave needs to be formalized. Either your turn to classes next week or I'm fired," Gina completed without surprise. The Sailors' School, the only private institution in the region, was partially financed by the John family. "Tell her they can send my termination notice. Gina, you need that job now more than ever." "What I need, Aunt, is dignity," she replied, caressing the small curve that was beginning to form in her belly. "And 4 children need a mother who can teach them never to bow for convenience." Weeks turned into months. Gina's body changed drastically, herbally growing in proportions that frightened even the experienced local midwife that Aunt Dulce had convinced to make discreet visits. The health center doctor, worried about her high blood pressure, insisted on the need for specialized care in the capital, something financially impossible without a job. "Robert needs to know," her father finally said during one of his rare permitted visits. Since he had defended his ex-future son-in-law, the relationship between father and daughter had cooled considerably. "He has responsibilities, Gina, and resources to ensure these children receive the necessary care." "My children will not be used as bargaining chips or objects of charity," she replied firmly. "They are my responsibility, only mine." In fact, the fear she didn't even confess to herself was that Robert would try to take the children from her. With his financial power and local influence, who could stop him from arguing that an unemployed single mother would not be able to raise 4 children adequately? So she persisted day after day in the almost monastic seclusion of Aunt Dul's house. She read all the pregnancy and childcare books she could find in the small municipal library, using her photographic memory to absorb every detail. When sleep didn't come, which happened with increasing frequency as the pregnancy progressed, she studied for the law school entrance exam using gold handouts that Aunt Dulce had gotten from an acquaintance who worked in the secretary's office of a prep course. "Why this now, my girl?" her aunt asked, finding her bent over books at 3 o'clock in the morning, her huge belly resting on an improvised pillow. "Because I need to be more than a sad story they tell in beauty salons," Gina replied without taking her eyes off the text on constitutional law. "I need to be the kind of person my children will be proud to call Mom." It was during one of those late-night study sessions that the first contractions began, soft at first, then intensifying with alarming speed. At 6 months pregnant, it was too soon. She called, panic growing along with the searing pain that now dominated her body. "The babies, something's wrong." What followed was a confusing sequence of images and sensations. Aunt Dulce on the phone calling the ambulance, the endless journey to the regional hospital, the urgent voices of doctors discussing emergency surgery, the paralyzing fear of losing those 4 lives that had become her only reason to continue. "We're going to need authorization for an immediate cesarean section," a doctor's distant voice said. "The patient has severe preeclampsia, and the heartbeats of 2 of the fetuses are irregular." The last thing Gina saw before the anesthesia took her into darkness was Aunt Dul's anguished face, holding her hand like an anchor in the middle of the storm. "Fight, my daughter," her aunt whispered in her ear. "Your babies need you. Fight like you've never fought before." And that's exactly what Gina did, even unconscious. She fought with every fiber of her being with a determination that would surprise even the experienced medical team, because those 4 small heartbeats were now the rhythm that guided her own existence. And, She would not allow anything, not even her exhausted and betrayed body, to silence it. We hope this story is captivating you. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what Gina's fate will be. Will her babies survive? And will she ever forgive Robert and Maxine? Don't forget to like and share A New Path. The white light of the surgical center seemed distant, like stars seen through deep waters. Gina floated between consciousness and darkness, anchored only by the rhythmic sound of the cardiac monitors and urgent voices discussing blood pressure and fetal heartbeats. Losing a lot of blood. Immediate transfusion, BB3 with bradycardia. We need to finish now. Mother saturation dropping. Fragments of sentences penetrated the veil of anesthesia, each word increasing the terror that enveloped her. With a superhuman effort, Gina tried to speak, to ask about her children, but no sound escaped her dry lips. She only felt a single tear streaming down the corner of her eye as the darkness reclaimed her. When she came to, she was in an ICU. The constant beep of the machines replaced the sound of the sea waves that had comforted her throughout her life. She tried to move, but her body seemed made of lead, every inch protesting with sharp pain. Welcome back. The gentle voice of a nurse materialized next to her. You gave us a big scare, warrior. My babies. Gina's voice came out unrecognizable, hoarse and fragile. The nurse smiled, adjusting the IV drip next to the bed. All alive, 2 boys and 2 girls, just as the ultrasound predicted. They're in the neonatal ICU, fighting bravely like their mother. I want to see them soon, the nurse promised, checking her vital signs. First, we need to get you stronger. You had severe eclampsia and bleeding during surgery, lost a lot of blood, needed 2 transfusions. For a moment, we feared. She didn't complete the sentence, but it wasn't necessary. Gina understood. She had been on the verge of death. Part of her wanted to just close her eyes and surrender to the deep fatigue that consumed every cell of her body. It would be so easy to give up, to let others take responsibility for those 4 tiny, fragile lives. 3 days, the nurse continued, misinterpreting her silence as confusion. You were unconscious for 3 days. Your aunt barely left the waiting room. We almost had to drag her home yesterday so she could get some rest. 3 days. 3 days lost from the beginning of her children's lives. Gina felt a fierce determination grow inside her. Overcoming the physical pain. Take me to them now. Take me to them. The neonatal ICU looked like a world apart. A universe of machines, tubes, flashing lights, and incubators. Gina, in a wheelchair, felt her heart almost stop as she contemplated the 40 beings in the lined-up incubators. So small, so fragile, each weighing little more than a kilo. They were born at 26 weeks, explained Dr. Johnson, the neonatologist in charge. They are extremely premature, but they're responding well considering the circumstances. Are they all normal? The question Gina feared to ask finally escaped. The doctor hesitated for just an instant, but long enough for her to feel her stomach sink. 3 of them have a development consistent with their gestational age. Despite their prematurity, they are facing the expected difficulties. Immature lungs, difficulty maintaining body temperature, risk of infections. But the second boy, Gina, followed the doctor's gaze to the second incubator. The baby there seemed even smaller than the others, his chest rising and falling, and an irregular rhythm, even with the ventilator support. We identified a congenital heart valve for tetralogy of Fallot. It's a complex condition but treatable with corrective surgeries when he gets stronger. Will he survive? The question came out as a whisper. We're doing everything possible, the doctor replied, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. He's a fighter like his mother, but the path will be more challenging for him. Gina reached out a trembling hand, touching the surface of the incubator, where her son was fighting for his life. What are you calling them on the charts? Babies A, B, C, and D, Mrs. Peterson, the doctor replied. We were waiting for you two. Johnny, Gina interrupted, looking at the fragile boy. This is Johnny, the warrior angel. Her eyes moved to the other incubators. Robert, like my father, Sophia and Clara. And at that moment, as if in response to the sound of his newly received name, little Johnny briefly opened his eyes. 2 tiny slits revealing dark irises that stared at Gina with an impossible intensity for such a new being. Hello, my love, she whispered, feeling warm tears stream freely. Mommy is here. Mommy will always be here. The following weeks turned into a haze of exhaustion, fear, and small victories. Gina divided her time between her own physical recovery, which was extremely slow due to the complications of childbirth and the endless hours in the neonatal ICU. She learned the language of the machines, how to interpret every number, every beep. She learned to touch her babies through the openings of the incubators, a practice called the kangaroo method that the doctors encouraged. She learned to pump her milk every 3 hours, even in the middle of the night, even when her exhausted body begged for rest. You don't need to be here 24 hours a day. Aunt Dulcie tried to convince her, worried about the deep dark circles under her eyes and the pounds she was losing quickly. The doctors will take good care of them. You need to regain your strength. They need to feel that they are not alone, Gina replied inflexibly. They need to know that someone is waiting for them. Johnny, as expected, faced the most difficult journey. Twice he needed to be resuscitated when his little heart failed. On both occasions, Gina was next to the incubator, whispering words of encouragement that the doctor swore had made a difference. "I've never seen anything like it," a veteran nurse commented. "It's as if he hears her voice and decides to fight harder." At the end of the second month, when the other 3 babies were already showing significant progress, gaining weight, breathing without assistance for increasingly longer periods, Johnny underwent his first emergency heart surgery. The 7 hours of waiting in the surgery waiting room were the longest of Gina's life. The procedure was successful, the pediatric cardiac surgeon announced, removing his mask with evident fatigue. "We managed to stabilize him for now, but he will eventually need additional surgeries as he grows." "What kind of follow-up will he need? What specialists?" Gina asked, already mentally calculating costs that she knew were impossible with her current financial situation. The ideal would be a pediatric cardiologist specializing in congenital heart disease. "Unfortunately, we don't have that specialist here. The closest one is in the capital." The worry added to the exhaustion, weighing on Gina's shoulders like a lead cape. How could she provide the treatment Johnny needed, without a job, without savings, depending on Aunt Dulce's modest retirement? When the quadruplets turned 3 months old, one of them still in the ICU, the other 3 already in the nursery, Gina finally allowed herself to return to her aunt's house for a full night, yielding to the doctor's pleas, who insisted that her own physical collapse would not help the children. It was during that night, while taking a long bath for the first time in months, that Aunt Dulce knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Gina, there's something I need to show you. Something I've kept for a long time, maybe too long." Wrapped in a worn bathrobe, Gina followed her aunt to the back room, which served as a pantry and archive of old memories. From a shoebox hidden under loose floorboards, Aunt Dulce took out a bundle of yellowed letters. "What is this, Aunt?" "Letters that I intercepted over the years," the old woman replied, her normally gentle face hardened by an unusual determination. "Letters that August John instructed the postman to lose for a monthly fee. Old Jaws, before he retired, gave them to me instead of destroying them." With trembling hands, Gina opened the first envelope. It was a letter from her to Robert written during a school trip 3 years ago, when she had been away for 2 weeks. A letter he had sworn he never received. Then a letter from Robert to her dated 5 years ago, shortly after they met. A passionate declaration that had never reached her hands. "Why?" she whispered, feeling dizzy with the revelation. "Why would someone do that? To separate you?" Aunt Dulce replied simply, "August John never accepted his son marrying someone from humble origins like ours. He preferred to see him with anyone else, even with your own sister. As long as it was a temporary relationship, with no consequences for the family fortune." Gina continued reading, letter after letter, each undelivered word revealing a different story from the one she had lived. In the lines, one could see the meticulous manipulation, the strategic isolation, the seeds of doubt planted deliberately. "This doesn't change what he did with Maxine," she said finally, folding the last letter. "It doesn't erase the lie." "No," Aunt Dulce agreed, "but it shows that there were powerful forces working against you from the beginning. Forces that may have contributed to the wrong choices you both made." Before Gina could reply, a knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was almost midnight. Visitors at that hour could only mean news from the hospital. Her heart raced with renewed fear. But it was not a hospital messenger waiting outside. It was an unknown woman about 60 years old, dressed in simple elegance that betrayed significant financial resources despite the discretion. "Gina Peterson," she asked, extending her hand. "My name is Dr. Beatrice Evans. I'm a retired lawyer, and I witnessed your intervention in the Central Square during the St. John's Festival 2 weeks ago." Gina frowned, confused. During one of her rare outings from the hospital, she'd witnessed a street vendor being unfairly accused of theft by a local merchant. She had instinctively intervened, citing free trade laws and contesting the illegal detention that the security guards were trying to carry out. "I was impressed with your eloquence and intuitive legal knowledge," the lawyer continued. "I asked about you and learned of your story. I'd like to offer you an opportunity." Aunt Dulce invited the unexpected visitor in serving strong black coffee while Dr. Beatrice explained her proposal. A full scholarship to study law at the Federal University of the Capital with housing assistance, and a monthly allowance financed by a foundation she presided over. "Why?" Gina asked, her natural suspicion sharpened by months of solitary struggle. Why would you help a stranger like this? The lawyer's gaze softened. Because 30 years ago, I was you, a young woman with potential, facing impossible circumstances, with no visible path ahead. Someone reached out to me at that moment, and now it's my turn to do the same. Gina felt the weight of the decision that was before her. Abandoning the relative security of her aunt's house, moving to the capital with 4 premature babies, one of them needing specialized medical care. I need to think, she said finally. My children. The university has a daycare for students' children, Beatrix replied. And most importantly, the university hospital has one of the best pediatric cardiology centers in the country. Your son Johnny would have access to the treatment he needs. Upon hearing her son's name, a detail she had not shared, Gina looked up surprised. I did my research. The lawyer smiled. I know the decision is not easy, but sometimes the greatest act of courage is accepting help when it is offered. What will Gina decide? Will she accept Dr. Beatrix's offer and move to the capital? And how will her life change with this new opportunity? Tell us what you think in the comments below. Thetide turns. The apartment was tiny with 2 bedrooms, a combined living room and kitchen, and a cramped bathroom on the 5th floor of a building with no elevator on the outskirts of the capital. For anyone else, it would seem inadequate, perhaps even claustrophobic. For Gina, it was a palace of possibilities. It's one of my oldest properties, explained Dr. Beatrix, handing her the keys with a smile. It's not luxurious, but it's safe and close to the campus and the university hospital. The rent is covered by the scholarship. Gina adjusted Clara on her lap while watching Sophia sleep in the double stroller. Robert and Johnny were at the hospital, the latter still needing constant monitoring. Johnny's discharge was only scheduled for the following month when he would turn 5 months old. Still well below ideal weight, but stable enough to continue treatment at home. How can I ever thank you for all this? Gina asked, her voice choked with emotion. By studying with determination and one day doing the same for someone else who needs it. The lawyer replied simply. Oh, and one more thing. She handed her an envelope. I hired a caregiver to help you with the children during classes. Mary is a nursing student at night and has experience with premature babies. The incredulity on Gina's face must have been evident as Beatrix laughed softly. Before you protest, remember no one builds a future alone. I believe in support networks, not lonely heroism. That night, the first in her new home, Gina sat on the small balcony, watching the lights of the big city that was now her refuge. Clara and Sophia slept in the simple crib that Beatrix had provided, while she studied an introductory manual of constitutional law. Between paragraphs, her thoughts flew to the hospital where half of her heart still was. We're going to make it, she whispered to the night. A promise to her children, to herself, and to the destiny that had brought them together on this unlikely journey. The first few months in the capital were a daily lesson in survival, adaptation, and growth. The pace of the metropolis, so different from the slow cadence of Shellfish Village, initially stunned Gina. The crowded buses, the chaotic traffic, the impersonality of relationships. Everything conspired to make her feel small and insignificant. But there was also freedom in anonymity. Here, no one knew her story. No one looked at her with pity, judgment, or morbid curiosity. She was just another university student, although one who showed up for classes with deep dark circles under her eyes and often dozed off during morning lectures. How do you do it? Asked Jane, a classmate, after catching her studying while simultaneously nursing 2 babies during a break. 4 babies in law school? I can barely handle my dog and the required readings. Gina smiled, used to the question. 1 minute at a time, Mama. 1 problem at a time. 1 day at a time. The truth was more complex, of course. It involved meticulous spreadsheets, organizing feeding schedules, medications, and medical appointments. It involved nights studying while the babies finally slept. It involved Mary, the caregiver sent by Beatrix, who had become much more a friend, a confidant, almost a sister. And it involved the support network that gradually formed around her. She discovered that she was not the only mother trying to balance motherhood and higher education. Through a university support group, she met other women in similar situations. Not with quadruplets, of course, but facing their own extraordinary challenges. Together, they created a rotating system to take care of each other's children during important exams and assignments. They shared not only practical responsibilities, but also the emotional highs and lows of the journey. The small victories, the inevitable defeats, the constant guilt of never being fully present either as a mother or as a student. We are rewriting the rules, declared Jessica, a single mother of twins and an engineering student during one of the group's weekly meetings, which they now called Mothers Without a Manual. Our mothers taught us to be strong. We are teaching our children that being strong also means knowing how to ask for help. Johnny, whose fragile heart continued to demand constant medical attention, paradoxically became the driving force that pushed Gina through the most difficult days. His biweekly appointments at the university hospital meant precious hours lost from studying, but also served as a constant reminder of why every sacrifice was worth it. Your son has extraordinary willpower. Dr. Johnson, the pediatric cardiologist, commented during a consultation when Johnny turned one. The way he fights is as if he understands that every heartbeat is a victory. Gina watched her son, now able to sit up on his own and play with colorful blocks, despite his slightly delayed development compared to his siblings. He teaches me every day what it means not to give up. In her second year of college, when the quadruplets turned 2, the first major test of the new life Gina had built arrived. Aunt Dulcie, her safe harbor and connection to the past, was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's. The condition, still in its initial stage, meant that she could no longer live alone in Shellfish Village. "She needs to come live with us," Gina declared without hesitation. Despite the apartment already being cramped for 5 people, the apartment can't hold anyone else, Beatrice argued, now more of a mentor than a benefactor. "But I have a proposal." The proposal was a small townhouse in the back of one of Beatrix's properties about 20 minutes from campus. It had 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and most importantly, no stairs that could confuse a lady with incipient dementia. The move brought new challenges, but also unexpected blessings. And Dulce, despite occasional memory lapses, became a stabilizing presence for the children. Her ability with stories and traditional songs from the Northeast enchanted the little ones, especially on nights when Gina needed to study for important exams. It was during one of those nights of intense study preparing for a civil law exam that Gina realized how her life had transformed in just 2 years. From a humiliated and abandoned young woman carrying 4 lives inside her with no idea how to move forward, she had become a respected student, patiently building a future for her makeshift but deeply united family. Her professors frequently commented on her exceptional retention capacity, that photographic memory she had always possessed but was now using with renewed purpose. Her academic performance, despite the extraordinary circumstances, was starting to attract attention. "You have the potential for a brilliant career," commented Professor Davies, head of constitutional law, after a particularly impressive presentation. "Have you ever considered specializing in international law? We have an exchange program with a university in The Hague that would be perfect for someone with your profile." The mere suggestion seemed absurd. How could she even consider an international exchange with 4 small children, one of them needing constant medical care? And there was still Aunt Dulcie, who was becoming more and more dependent on supervision for daily tasks. However, the seed had been planted. That night, as she watched her children sleep, Robert and Johnny sharing a bunk bed, Sophia and Clara in twin beds decorated with fluorescent stars, she allowed herself, for the first time in years, to dream beyond the immediate needs of survival. Will Gina accept the offer to study abroad? And what will the consequences of this decision be for her, her children, and those who hurt her in the past? Tell us what you would do if you were in Gina's position. Leave your comment below. The return tide, the 7 years that had passed since her desperate escape from Shellfish Village, had transformed Gina in ways she never imagined possible. The mirror now reflected a 34-year-old woman, her eyes still expressive, but marked by soft lines of worry and determination. Her hair was shorter and more practical, and her posture was that of someone who'd learned to carry the world on her shoulders without bending. "Dr. Peterson, the documents for the preliminary hearing are ready," announced Jane, an intern at the law firm where Gina had worked for 2 years, ever since she graduated with honors. "Dr. Clark asked me to remind you of the strategic meeting at 3. "Thank you." "Jane," Gina replied, adjusting the reading glasses she had recently adopted. "You can tell him I'll be there, but I need to leave early today. Johnny has an appointment at 5. At 10 years old, Johnny Peterson continued his battle against his congenital heart condition. 2 corrective surgeries had improved his quality of life, but the cardiologist had warned that bulga, ash grew, more complex procedures would be inevitable. Despite this, he was an extraordinarily lively and intelligent boy, at the top of his class at school, passionate about books and science, as if every day were a gift he could not waste. Robert, his identical twin except for his healthy heart, had become his instinctive protector, always vigilant, always ready to intercede when his brother's condition limited his activities. Sophia and Clara, inseparable as only twins can be, balanced the family dynamic with their vibrant energy and limitless creativity. The relationship between Gina and Alexander Bergman had evolved from a professional partnership into a deep friendship over the years. The New Heart Foundation, A direct result of their meeting in The Hague, had already funded treatments for dozens of Brazilian children with congenital heart disease, including state-of-the-art equipment for the university hospital where Johnny had his follow-ups. "Mom, look." Johnny pointed to the laptop screen, interrupting Gina's thoughts. The quadruplets had invaded her home office, as they did every morning before leaving for school. "Shellfish Village is in the news." Gina's heart raced as she read the headline. "Mega real estate project threatens to displace residents in historic coastal city in the Northeast." The article detailed how a business group planned to turn a large part of the city's outskirts into a luxury resort, displacing families who had lived in the region for generations, including the area where Aunt Dulce's old house was, which Gina had never sold, keeping it as her last link to her origins. "John Developments leads the consortium," a part of the report said, making Gina's blood run cold. After so long, that name still had the power to trigger painful memories. "Is everything okay, Mom?" asked Sophia, always the most sensitive to her mother's mood swings. "Of course, my love." Gina forced a smile, closing the laptop screen. "Just remembering old things. Now, everyone to school. Aunt Mary is already waiting in the car." After the children's noisy departure, Gina reopened the news, studying every detail with the trained eye of a lawyer. Something inside her, that unshakable determination that had always defined her, began to awaken. It wasn't just about her old house or memories of the past. It was about justice. 3 phone calls later, her decision was made. The bus that was taking her back to Shellfish Village after 10 years away seemed to be traveling not only on asphalt roads, but also through layers of time. Through the window, Gina watched the landscape gradually change, the concrete of the metropolis giving way to green fields, then to dunes, and finally to the sea. That same sea that had cradled her dreams and nightmares since childhood. "Are you sure about this?" Alexander's voice sounded on the phone when she called from the bus terminal of the neighboring city. "I can take the next flight and meet you there tomorrow." "You need to do this alone, Alex," she replied, feeling the weight and lightness of that truth. "Are the children doing well with Mary and Aunt Dulce?" "Perfectly well." Johnny asked if you've already found the villains who want to destroy houses. Alexander laughed softly. "It seems his sense of justice is hereditary." Gina smiled, feeling that familiar wave of gratitude for Alexander's presence in her life. Not as the romance that many expected to blossom, but as a friendship that transcended conventional expectations. Their shared history of similar family losses. His deceased wife had a heart problem similar to Johnny's, had created a bond between them that dispensed with traditional definitions. Shellfish Village had changed, and at the same time remained exactly the same. New commercial establishments dotted the main street, but the pace remained slow, the colors vibrant, the smell of sea, air omnipresent. Unknown faces mixed with familiar ones, some aged, others just slightly marked by time. The Blue Sea Hotel, the only establishment of its kind in the city, received her without recognition. The receptionist was too young to remember the scandalous story of the abandoned teacher. Settled in a simple room with a sea view, Gina opened her document folder, reviewing the legal strategy she had developed during the trip. The public hearing on the real estate project was scheduled for the next day at the City Hall. Preliminary research revealed countless environmental and social irregularities, inadequate impact studies, insufficient compensation, and possible violations of preservation areas. With her specializations in environmental and housing law, Gina had identified enough legal loopholes to, at the very least, significantly delay the project. A brief knock on the door interrupted her concentration. "Room service I didn't order," she thought, getting up to open it. The face on the other side of the door, however, did not belong to any hotel employee. It was Maxine, her sister, 10 years older with premature gray streaks and eyes loaded with a complex mixture of emotions. "I heard you were in town," she said simply. The silence that followed seemed dense enough to be cut with a knife. A decade of unsaid words, unanswered questions, unhealed wounds. "How are your children?" Maxine finally asked, her voice trembling. "They're well," Gina replied, surprising herself with the absence of the anger she expected to feel. "Do you want to come in?" The conversation that followed was initially uncomfortable, filled with silences and incomplete sentences. Gradually, however, the barriers began to give way. Maxine talked about her failed marriage to a local merchant, the inability to have children that tormented her, and her life in a city where she continued to be the other woman in the story everyone endlessly retold. "Robert never remarried," she finally revealed, looking at her own hands. "When you disappeared, he changed. Became obsessed with finding you, then with burying himself in work. He took over the family business after his father's death, but he's no longer that charming, carefree boy. And why are you telling me this? Because he'll be at the hearing tomorrow. He's the main investor in the project." "And why?" Maxine hesitated, biting her lower lip. Because I have documents that can help your case and irregularities that I discovered while working in the company's secretary's office in recent years. Gina watched her sister with a mixture of distrust and curiosity. Why? Why would you betray Robert now? Because maybe this is my only chance to do something right, Maxine replied, tears finally streaming. Years is long enough to realize that some stains on the soul don't just disappear with the passing of days. How will the confrontation between Gina and Robert unfold? What will the public reaction be when they see the abandoned teacher return as a powerful lawyer? Leave your comment below with your predictions. The confrontation. The city hall was packed when Gina entered the next morning. Dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue suit, with a briefcase of documents in her hand, she attracted curious glances, some of recognition, others simply noticing the presence of a stranger at such a local event. The main table was occupied by figures of authority: the current mayor, representatives of the Department of the Environment, and him. Robert John, now 37, with slightly graying hair at his temples, his face more angular, harder. His eyes scanned the audience distractedly as he adjusted theme microphone for his presentation. That's when their eyes met. The shock on his face would have been comical in other circumstances, the color draining from his features, his lips parted in absolute surprise, his hand frozen in the air. For a moment, time seemed to go back, and they were again just Gina and Robert, before the lies, before the pain. The moment passed. The meeting began with technical presentations about the project, economic projections, and promises of jobs and development. When they opened the floor for public participation, Gina was the first to stand up. "My name is Gina Peterson," she introduced herself, her voice clear and firm, echoing through the hall. "I am a lawyer specializing in environmental law, and I represent the residents of the area affected by the project." The immediate hub was quickly silenced when she began to present point by point the legal flaws of the project, citing laws and precedents with the precision of someone who completely masters the subject. Her presentation, impeccable and devastating, culminated with the exhibition of the documents provided by Maxine, proof that environmental studies had been falsified and officials bribed. Therefore, she concluded, "We request the immediate suspension of any approval until an independent study is conducted and adequate compensation is negotiated with each affected family." The silence that followed was deafening. The mayor, visibly uncomfortable, announced a break for the analysis of the new information presented. As the room slowly emptied, Robert remained motionless, his eyes fixed on Gina. "We need to talk," he said finally, approaching her with hesitant steps. "We have nothing to talk about besides the legal process, Mr. John," she replied, organizing her documents. "Gina, please. 10 years you just disappeared. I looked for you in every hospital, every neighboring city. Did you really look?" Her voice betrayed an emotion she thought she had overcome. "Or did you just look to appease your conscience?" "I didn't know about the babies," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "I swear I didn't know." The impact of those words hit her like an unexpected wave. "How do you know about them now?" "My father told me years later when it was already too late, when you had already left for good." His eyes pleaded for something Gina was not ready to give. "How many are they healthy? Are they mine?" "4," Gina replied after a long silence. "2 boys, 2 girls, and yes, they are your biological children. Not that that means anything after 10 years of absence. I want to meet them." The determination in his voice was undeniable. "I have that right. Rights are built on responsibility, Mr. John. Something you never showed any interest in taking." The tense conversation was interrupted by the return of the mayor and other authorities. The decision, clearly influenced by the public exposure of the irregularities, was to temporarily suspend the project for technical re-evaluations. A preliminary but significant victory. Gina was preparing to leave when her phone rang. Alexander's name on the screen would normally bring comfort, but something about the time of the call set off an alarm in her mother's heart. "Alex, are the children okay?" Alexander's normally calm voice sounded tense. "Johnny had an episode, Gina. We're at the university hospital. The doctors are with him now." The world seemed to slow down. Each subsequent word came as if through water. "Sudden heart failure. The situation is stable but critical. The need for a specialized procedure in the next few days." Dr. Johnson mentioned that considering his history in genetics, the ideal donor for a stem cell procedure would be his biological father. Robert, still close enough to hear the conversation, saw the transformation on Gina's face. From the confident lawyer to the terrified mother in a matter of seconds. "What happened?" he asked, the previous hostility replaced by genuine concern. "Johnny'll, my son, your son is in the hospital." The words came out in a rush as she frantically gathered her belongings. "I need to go back immediately." "I'll take you," Robert offered without hesitation. "I have the company jet at the regional airport. We can be in the capital in 2 hours. The look Gina gave him contained 10 years of resistance, pride, and hard-won independence. But it also contained the unconditional love of a mother who would do anything, including accepting help from the one who had hurt her deeply to save her son. "Let's go," she said simply. "This is a critical moment. What will the outcome of the surgery be? How will Gina and Robert's relationship evolve from here? Will Gina finally find happiness and peace? Leave your comment below with your predictions." The family reunion during the flight between medical explanations and anxious calls to the hospital. Gina told Robert about Johnny, his defective heart since birth. The surgeries, the hospitalizations, but also his brilliant intelligence, his sweet humor, and his incomparable courage in the face of challenges that would make many adults give up. "He has your eyes," she said at one point. Emotional exhaustion briefly lowering her defenses. "All of them do. It's like looking at you 4 times every day." When they finally arrived at the hospital, Alexander was waiting at the entrance, tall, blonde, with a look of relief at seeing Gina that was quickly replaced by curiosity when he noticed Robert. "He's stable," he informed her, hugging Gina briefly. "Dr. Johnson wants to talk about treatment options." The questioning look he gave Robert was answered with a single sentence from Gina. "He's their father." Dr. Johnson's explanation was simultaneously hopeful and devastating. Johnny's condition had progressed faster than expected. A compatible stem cell procedure offered excellent chances of success, but time was of the essence. "I'll do the compatibility tests immediately," Robert offered without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." In the following 48 hours, a strange truce was established between the past and the present. Robert met the quadruplets. First Johnny in the hospital room, then the other 3, brought by Alexander for a controlled visit. The encounter, which Gina had feared for a decade, happened with surprising naturalness. The children, prepared with age-appropriate explanations, reacted with the curiosity and openness typical of childhood, uncontaminated by adult grudges. The test results confirmed what the doctors suspected. Robert was the ideal donor. The procedure was scheduled for the following week, enough time for the necessary medical preparation on the eve of the surgery, while Johnny slept under the effect of mild sedatives. Gina and Robert met in the hospital cafeteria, the first truly private moment since they reconnected. "Why are you doing this?" she finally asked, studying the man she had once known intimately and who now seemed like a familiar stranger. "Because he's my son," he replied simply. "Because maybe this is my only chance to do something truly meaningful in life. And afterward, when he's recovered, what do you expect?" Robert contemplated his untouched cup of coffee before answering. "The chance to get to know them, to be a part of their lives to the extent that you allow and they desire. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Gina. I know some things are irreparable. I'm just asking for the opportunity to try to be better than I was." Under the starry sky, visible through the hospital windows, Gina finally allowed herself to accept that the circle that had begun to be drawn 15 years ago was finding its closure. Not with revenge or destruction, but with a form of redemption that would benefit not only Johnny, but dozens of other children through the foundation, that ironically would now unite the John family's resources with the knowledge and dedication that Gina and Alexander had built over the years. Life, Gina realized as she watched the sun rise, announcing the day of the surgery, does not move in straight lines of cause and effect, but in complex spirals where pain and joy, loss and gain, separation and reunion, eventually find their own balances. Not because fate so dictates, but because human beings with all their imperfection occasionally choose to build instead of destroy, to forgive instead of resent, to look forward instead of remaining trapped in the past. In the waiting room, surrounded by her improbable family, her 4 miraculous children, Aunt Dula in her moments of lucidity, Alexander with his constant support, and even Robert redeeming himself through the greatest sacrifice he could offer, Gina finally understood that her true strength had never been in lonely resistance, but in the ability to create genuine connections that transformed strangers into family, adversity into opportunity, and wounds into unexpected sources of healing.